Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast. I'm Dan Hilton, and today I have the pleasure of being joined today by former Empire player and currently retired AUDL champion, Matt Auletta, best known in the ultimate world as Pippin. As we have to do this, since there is an ongoing global pandemic, Pip, I got to ask, how's everything going over there?
We're good. Fortunate for the most part. So just working from home, a lot of extra time with the family, just in the house, me, my wife, my son. So as good as can be.
Yep, both you and I on Long Island, where things are still, again, pretty shut down, depending on where anybody's listening in the country. And I think for the Empire fans, for those who live locally in New York, they know that there isn't much movement. Everyone's still kind of shut down, and that's how it's going to be for a while. But I also want to add, before we really get into this conversation, almost full discretion at the top of the show. This will be like every other serious and a little fun interview that we do here on the Empire podcast, but with the added caveat that with my guest today, it's maybe the third Ultimate Frisbee player I ever met, but is actually someone that I've gotten to know better in the last few years than the first 8 or 9 that we did know each other. So instead of going in chronological order like I usually do with our guests, I think it may be more fun to start at the finish line of your Empire career. Then we'll work back to, we'll say some of the older memories when you and I both looked a little younger than a decade plus ago. So can you talk a little bit about not only your decision to retire or an extended hiatus, but what was it like knowing that the end of your Empire playing career coincided with a trophy?
Yeah, so I was actually gonna retire after the 2018 season. That just seemed like the right time to do it. We had beaten Toronto, which was basically like a whole championship trophy in itself. And then, off season goes, and I was like a little on the fence about it. And then you hear about some of the good signings, and then you hear that Brian Jones is going to be the coach. It's like, I really just, I don't know, like maybe I'll do one more shot at this. So I did. I'm very happy I did. My role on the team wasn't exactly the same, but I loved every second of it just as much as all the other seasons. So it was a great way to end it.
Yeah, and other than ending with the championship, what was different about that final season? And I just don't mean individual. I just mean even the team dynamic about knowing that you were a championship contender that season.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it was very different. I mean, I got replaced on the lines by like 2 world-class players. So,
Right.
I wouldn't have played me either in most of those situations. So, I moved way down the depth chart just as like all the other roles people could fill. So, I tried to focus more on just being a good teammate from the sideline and, talking to Brian when I could about what I could do or this or that. And just trying to get on the field sometimes. And, I still had a great time. I love all my teammates. So it was a lot of fun. Just, different than the other years where mostly just starting on offense all the time. So
Right.
different, but
You still did play in 9 games in your final season. So it's not as if you were a fringe player by any means. But I do want to go back now to the beginning, joining up with the Empire for the 2014 season, year 2 of the Empire build. And I think the difference for the Empire between now and then is pretty obvious, as we're already speaking about. The roster, of course, looks a lot different. And there's a lot of different, I'm not going to say any names, but we know the names that have been thrown out there, MVP candidates in the past, champions in the past. But how is the league as a whole different from then until what you see now?
it's just the talent level is just off the charts. It's not even close to the same. The coaching's better. The preparedness is better. The game day atmospheres are better. Just in any way anything you could possibly ask, it is just better. There's nothing worse that I can think of. It just keeps growing, and it's been fun to be a part of.
And now your first year was largely on the D line, then moving over to the O line for the 2015 to 2018 seasons, and then finally heading back to the D line for your last season. In those 2 best individual statistical seasons, again, not saying for a team aspect or even what you might have been feeling in your heart, but the stats say 2015 and 2017, those were your big years, 23 goals and 30 assists in 2015, and then 20 and 20 in 2017. What do you think brought the best out of you in those 2 seasons in particular?
So 2014, I only played maybe half the games. I had prior coaching obligations, so I wasn't available all the time. So, that was a little different. Statistically, I guess those seasons were better, but I really just tried to complement the players we had on offense with me in those different seasons. So, some years I was the guy who was going to throw it deep more often, take more chances. And we had other guys that were just going to, not make a lot of mistakes and reset it. And then we had other years where there were a bunch of guys that wanted to send it deep, whatever. So I just focused on not really turning it over and kind of playing more simple. And, just, I guess, slightly different play styles in those different seasons resulted in different stats. 2017, we had Harper taking a lot of shots. So I didn't want to also take a lot of shots. I mean, his were better for the most part. So I tried to just find space on the field where, when he's holding the disc, basically the whole field is dangerous. So, other defenders are trying to creep in some other space and cover some of the cutters or take away some of his dangerous spaces that he can hit. And, they poach off me and I just find space and I would leave. Like, he didn't need me as a reset sometimes. So, just very different. So I scored a bunch of goals that way, just like breaking free when nobody was covering me.
Well, as an ultimate player on the Empire, unlike some of maybe Tristan the Arter would be the first example here, but you were, we'll say, in the second half of your ultimate career, even when you joined up with the Empire. But how do you think you improved from 2014 to 2019 as a player, even again in the latter half of your career?
Yeah, I definitely just smarter. The stats are kind of just like a vain metric sometimes, but seeing how many turnovers I threw in one of those earlier seasons, it was like, this is a lot. And like, you don't necessarily realize it if you don't have actual numbers to look at. And, I think we got the disc back plenty of times when I threw some of those, but even if I could cut them down just a little bit, like seeing a real number made a real difference. And then it just, fewer turnovers result in better results.
And I do want to talk about some of the guys that have been with you through that whole journey as well. Having seen them, whether it was players that you had known from Long Island, Matt Lamar, or playing club with, being Ryan Dross and Mike Dross, how have you seen those three in particular improve over the years as well?
Yeah, Lamar's gotten just worlds better. Not to say he was bad. Sorry, Matt. But yeah, no, he works really hard. I mean, we were carpool buddies to practice from Long Island all the time. And, I know how hard he was working in the gym, just track workout, just whatever he was doing. And, he just put in a ton of work and he got better year after year after year. The Drosts were always just freakishly athletic and they're really good. So I don't know if they really put in any extra work, but I'm sure they did. But yeah, they were just always impressive.
Yeah, well, with the Dross brothers you can go back and hear on the Empire podcast feed and listen to the conversation with both of the Dross brothers. And the thing that is surprising to me is that so many players, and Ben Yacht's also an example where he started with the windshield, then he winds up going to college. But for the Dross brothers, they got so much of their early ultimate education being professional ultimate players of the Empire. So obviously that they were going to improve, even though they themselves are now in their 30s as well and on the second half of their careers. Now, I want to talk about, we're going to start with the fun stuff, then we're going to go into the other stuff here, because I do want to talk about your career in particular. And you know where we're going with this. So I want to start with the nice things that I've gone around and people have said. So I don't think people think of you as a cerebral player that you are. That was the one thing that in talking to others behind the scenes, they keep saying about the things between your ears and just a great understanding that you have of spacing and timing. So again, I want to ask, how much do you think it's personal growth through experience? And what do you think can be chalked up to chemistry with your teammates?
Yeah. I mean, chemistry is huge. Years ago, I was playing a lot with Lionel, and, just early season practice stuff. There were some miscues on some dump throws, this and that. And just, you talk, you feel it out and, you just learn what he prefers, what I prefer. And then like from then on out, I don't think we miscued a dump throw the whole season. And that's just chemistry, knowing what your teammates want, where to be. The field awareness stuff. Yeah. I mean, I probably got smarter on the field every year. Just had to, also getting a tiny bit slower every year. So
I think it's a little bit of cliche too, to say that being a lefty handler, there are certain things that you get that righty handlers or righty throwers don't necessarily get. Do you think at the AUDL level that was something that you relied on, being a lefty, and how did you actually learn to use it? I mean, it's one thing to be left-handed and throw an ultimate disc, but it's another to actually be able to use being a left-handed thrower as a weapon. How did you start to learn to use that as a weapon?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in general, just when I first started, I threw a lot more than other people just for fun, just for practice, whatever. So, I was a lefty, but I also became a better thrower than a lot of the people I was playing with at the time. So, I mean, I guess there were advantages then for it being, a little different than what people were used to seeing. And I was a little better at it. And then, yeah, just over time, I mean, I really enjoyed lefty high releases. I just popped those over everybody. It got to the point of practice where they would start screaming like, hand high, hand high, hand high. It's his only throw. And I would still throw it over them and just like kind of laugh in their face and be like, yeah, but you can't stop it. So, I mean, that being lefty, yeah, there are some advantages, but at a high level, teams also cue in on it and they're ready for it. We went to DC once, and first few points of the game, I broke whoever was marking me, just like quick high releases to the break side. We scored like 2 or 3 throws, and then, Daryl quickly switched the force. Like they came down and we had to change the play. And I was like, oh, they switched. And the guy marking me, I don't remember who it was. He was even just like, yeah, of course we did. Like, we can't just let you keep doing that. Like he said that to me while we were playing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny.
Well, are there any, the answer could be no here, but are there any individual defenders that your time in Ultimate, or at least in the AUDL level, that stand out to you as being particularly difficult marks on you?
So no, I mean, there were always some people that were a little more physical, and especially since I'm a little smaller, like that was tough. Yeah. But, I got used to that. Izzy used to push me around a lot at practice just to kind of get used to it. So, yeah, I mean, Izzy would just kind of bump me and push me in practice a lot, and that helped with some of the physicalness that, I don't really have against people. So I got a little more used to it.
And I think what you don't necessarily have with that physicality, just with your frame, you certainly make up for with the passion of what's going on inside. And so you knew this was coming. I think Empire fans are even excited, I think, to the people I've asked. So I have 2 words for you, and we need a little explanation. And then after you tell the story, I'm going to give you the out, and I'm going to ask you, how do you think that passion evolved as you grew as a player and a person? I'm going to give you first the option to guess. What do you think those 2 words I'm going to say are?
Hothead? I don't really know.
All right. Better yet, green bananas.
Oh, I didn't get wind of that one in the group me. All right. Oh, yeah. We were at a tournament once, and they gave us no tournament. This was way back in college. They gave us no tournament food. We were in the championship, and I guess they gave us some tournament food. It was a bag full of bananas that were so green you could not peel them. Like I guess they were right off the tree. So I don't know. We were playing a really close game. Something annoyed me. I was trying to find something to eat because it was college and we didn't bring a lot of stuff. We were not prepared. So I was trying to eat the banana. I couldn't even tear it open. And I eventually just grabbed the whole bag by the plastic, swung it around, threw it at the fence, and just yelled, "I hate green bananas." And my friends have never let me forget that.
And then again, the follow-up there, though, how do you think that passion for you, and you can clearly see the love of the game, the love of the sport, how do you think that has evolved as you've grown as a player and a person?
Yeah, so over time, I tried to, use it more than just kind of like let the rage, I don't know, just like, flow uncontrollably. Yeah, I mean, I guess I always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder being smaller. So I was always a little feisty, and yeah, I don't know, when I get shoved around a little bit, sometimes it just gets me going. And then, I try and, body back or whatever, but I'm just, it'll make me run a little harder. It'll make me push a little more. And, if I'm not on the field, I have also just tried to channel it into just screaming my head off from the sideline, doing as much as I can from the sideline. So yeah, definitely tried to channel it a little better as I got older. Yeah.
Well, in your defense on the green bananas as well, something that I'm glad that now in retirement, we can announce this. I don't know if your opponents ever knew this, but you're someone, very like myself, though. One of the things we first connected on, again, all these years ago, is that I seem to cramp up. I don't know whether we have a lack of potassium in our system or our tiny frames or whatever it is, but cramping is certainly an issue with both of our games. And so in your defense, when there are no bananas on the sideline, And cramping is certainly going to be a part of that, especially again, college is different than AUDL, where AUDL you're preparing for the whole weekend. You know that what's in front of you, you know the four quarters. But again, when you're playing in other tournaments and you've got 8 games in 2 days and it's field to field and it's muddy and you're just trying to get water in between. So in your defense, bananas are certainly an important part of dealing with cramps. And I would then ask too about that cramping situation for younger players who might deal with things like that. How have you kept your body, again, even one that does deal with, yes, minor cramping, but how have you kept your body ready and fresh for AUDL seasons for the last few years?
Yeah, as I got older, I mean, I definitely started going and just working out at the gym way more. And, that's not necessarily an endurance thing, but it just overall, I felt much healthier the last few seasons. I got dinged up once or twice. I tore my lat on like a crazy layout fall once. So, some of that stuff is kind of unavoidable, but in general, I felt much healthier. Just the last few years. And I really just putting more work in at the gym, I think is the most important thing. Just treating yourself right and just being prepared.
Well, I know we keep bouncing around here. So this time we're going to bounce all the way back. Now, Hofstra University on Long Island, you were a student there from 2003 to 2007, helping found the men's team along the way, starting with a mixed team. So I would ask now the bigger question. I asked you how the AUDL has changed, but how do you think Ultimate has changed throughout all these years that you've seen? And I mean, I know you could almost write a book on it, and I'm just asking you to put it in a succinct answer, but other than just the travel and the attention and the media and but how do you think the game itself, even on the field, has changed in all these years?
I think everyone is a better thrower. I think the level of throwing from 2003 to now, like across the board, is just leagues and leagues, worlds and worlds better. Yeah. And I think in, 10, 15 more years, I think that's just that will continue. I think people will get better and better at throwing to the point where like everyone looks like Harper out there, or everyone feels like Steve Nash, just like dishing all over the place, like crazy, like what seems crazy at the time, like maybe eventually that'll just be normal.
Well, then not speaking on the field, but even off the field, and I don't want to make you feel old here, but it was for me looking back, even as I'm prepping this interview, this chronocentric illusion where I saw the pictures of your first few years at Hofstra and Hofstra's first few years of Ultimate of existence. And there's these faded pictures on the original, and we're talking original Facebook template, and there's no jerseys of any kind. Everyone's just trying to wear the same color. Can you imagine Ultimate? I'm talking about the organizational parts of Ultimate going on, the AUDL, and yes, all the other things in the background, whether it's the college level or the other levels as well. Can you imagine that Ultimate has become this gigantic force that it is, the way that social media and media have changed along with Ultimate? Can you just imagine back from when you started to 18 years later as to where the sport is now?
Yeah, I mean, I it's so fun and it's simple and, there's some beauty in it. And so, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it just keeps growing and that people love it. And I hope it continues.
Well, I got to ask too, all the way back at the start, who were some of your Ultimate influences? And I would actually ask you as well, who do you think that's around today has a game that's like yours? And they don't necessarily have to be a lefty. And I know those 2 different questions, but first I'll ask who your Ultimate influences.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like watching a little bit of whatever videos you could find way back when, I always thought Alex Nord was really cool. I am not like Alex Nord in any way. He was gigantic and a cutter and cool and whatever. So that was cool. But for people I actually played with, my friend Tim Chang from Rutgers, I joined a club team that he was on, and I felt like I learned a lot from him the first few years. So I always like to say that Tim was one of the bigger influences on me. He'll probably never see this, but that's okay. And then, sorry, what was the second question?
And then in today's game, are there players that you find that have games similar to yours? Oh, yeah. And when you look at they don't even have to be younger players. They could just be other players. They don't have to be lefties either.
Yeah. Like Yacht and Babbitt. No. Nobody immediately comes to mind that, like in the ADL that we play against really. I tried to just use the space. Like I wasn't super fast. Like there are better versions of me for sure. But like I kind of felt like in my time in the ADL that I was very well rounded, whereas a lot of other people were really good at a few things. So I tried to just take what I was given and, not necessarily make the prescribed cuts or this or that. If I thought, this guy's good, like I'm not going to get open here. Like I'm just going to take what I'm going to give and use all this space. Like worst case, I free up some space for a teammate. Best case, I break free. There's a pass. Somebody else can hit me later. So I'm sure there are people out there doing it, but I felt like I tried to play a little different than some other people, especially the first few years. I tried to just maximize the space, the horizontal space more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, once it goes back to just between your ears, the spacing, the understanding of timing cuts, and at the AUDL level, doing it at the highest level. It's almost where, I think I've said this a few times on this podcast before, but I remember the first time I'm sitting in the crowd, I'm actually calling the Empire game. And when we stopped during a break, it was Ben Katz's first year with the Empire. And I turned to the person next to me. I said, if I do everything in my game at a great level. So everything I do well, if you take that and ratchet it up to 10, that's what Ben Katz is, but we're not close. He's the elite example of all the things that I do well in my own game. And so that's what I always say about Ben Katz. But yeah, if you watch us play, we are nothing alike. Ben Katz is Ben Katz, and I and I also play Ultimate. That is what happens. So I will ask, so Pippin, the reason we call you Pippin, it's not overtly complicated, but where does the nickname come from?
Yeah, like one of the first few weeks at Hofstra, we played a game. I think it was after our very first intercollegiate game against Adelphi, right down the road. We just went out to dinner afterwards, and one of the seniors at the time, he was just like, "Oh, you look a lot like Pippin from Lord of the Rings," and it stuck like immediately. Just I don't know if anyone ever used my name ever again. And then we later realized it was actually Mary that I looked like. So I like the name Pippin better. So I'm glad you messed up on that.
Yeah, I think Pippin certainly has worked a lot better than not even Mary, but Merryweather as the
Yeah.
character in Lord of the Rings is. Now, I'm going to stay at Hofstra as well here. I've been told that basketball isn't your best sport. You and I talked about that off camera and off mic, but apparently dodgeball could have been your sport if not for a freak injury. You want to talk about that? How dodgeball almost derailed your ultimate career?
No. So dodgeball, first of all, no, I can't throw a ball hard enough to be good at it. I was fine at catching them and dodging them. Yeah, we were intramural tournament at Hofstra. The Frisbee team put together a team. We were like relatively far into the tournament. Everyone's eliminated except me. The other team has a bunch of people on it still. They were all throwing at me at the same time. Things were getting heated for some reason. I don't even know. I caught a ball as more were coming. So I threw the one I caught down and I tried to catch the second one and it caught my finger funny and it just shattered. It was just destroyed. So I still caught that ball. I would like the record to state that I caught that ball.
We have that on record.
So
audio, video, we've got.
Yeah. But my finger was destroyed and there was still one person on the other side. And I guess because of time constraints, they weren't playing with the rules where if you catch it, somebody comes back in. So it was still just me and this guy who had an absolute cannon. And I'm looking at my friends and I'm looking at my finger. And I'm like, I don't know if I can catch another one. And I know I can't throw hard enough to get him out if it's one-on-one. They're like, try. Like, I tried. It didn't go well. But my finger was already wrecked. So, and then I had to have surgery and there were a few pins in my finger. And yeah, that was that.
Well, they
It's
say
fine now, though. I got my mobility back, which they didn't think I'd be able to. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
And for those watching on the video version on YouTube, it's the right hand. So it's a non-throwing hand. So
yeah, I got real lucky with that too. So I was still able to throw in downtime when I couldn't like play tournaments.
Yeah. And they also say that the gentleman who you were facing at the end there, not only does the speed of that ball get faster every time you get to tell the story, but I think he now pitches for the Dodgers. So in your defense, I think you're in good shape. So the other thing I would ask too is what I ask everybody, that coming from a sports background, again, you in particular, where Ultimate was not to say that it was in its infancy, it's been around for 6 decades now. But as far as getting into the mid-major college scene, it was still kind of breaking in when you were beginning at Hofstra and you were, again, at the early starts of that program. what other sports had an influence on your athletic career?
I played a lot of soccer growing up. Not a lot of basketball. So soccer, tennis, racquetball, just running in general. Yeah, I don't know. I played a lot of everything with my friends, even like a tiny bit of like street hockey. I wouldn't claim to be any good at it, but I was just always outside playing whatever. And I think I was, again, maybe this is why I was well-rounded on the ultimate field. Just more well-rounded sports playing in general. I didn't like specialize in anything. I didn't like do any crazy club stuff. I just played a few years of soccer, a few years of tennis, just bounce around.
Yeah, I mean, and I always ask other people that how do you think those skills translate? But I do want to ask in particular about something that you had to learn to deal with, and that is some of the wind. And for those listening all over, yeah, obviously up in Chicago, our listeners there, there's plenty of wind there. And in New England, you got parts of that. But Long Island wind is a special kind of thing. And how do you think that the Long Island wind shaped you as a player?
Yeah, it was really bad at Hofstra sometimes. And one of the things when I was coaching then, I coached the women's team then for 10 years, just for people who don't know. They would make fun of me because our mantra was always, if you can throw here, you can throw anywhere. And I really think that was true. I mean, we had some practices where, like, even for me, trying to throw to them when they were still learning, like, it was hard to throw to them. That's how windy it was. So, you know, sometimes it would ruin a practice, but we would spend a lot of time trying to throw and just, you know, kind of modify the drills to make them either closer or whatever was needed, or just like play a fun little game instead where you're still like throwing and trying to generate some spin on the disc. But yeah, I mean, playing at Hofstra where it was windy definitely made me a better thrower overall.
Yeah, and just speaking from the coaching acumen too. I mean, you again were the head coach of the women's team for a decade, and as far as I was an assistant coach on the men's team for a few years there, but it's very true that the mentality as the coach, one of the difficulties was you'd show up and it'd be a super windy day, and you've got these 18-year-olds that have never played ultimate, and you're trying to get them motivated, you're trying to get them interested in the sport, and yet every time they release the disc, it goes 100 feet in the air, or it goes right into the ground because it's so windy. And it's almost this trade-off where if you can get those younger players to break through that barrier of being confident up and finally getting to just a level of competency with the disc that they're able to at least enjoy what they're doing. But unfortunately, I find that you lose so many obviously you lose a lot in the first few weeks of any recruitment, but you lose so many in those first few weeks and months because they just can't seem to break through. And then it winds up just being too much.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, we would try and recruit, and, you know, sometimes there'd be a lot of people, and then you pray that like that first week or two, just like, please give me like 65 degrees and sunny and like 2-mile-an-hour winds. Like, please, please, please. And then you show up one of the first days when new people coming out to practice or, you know, pick up. We didn't really like practice the first few days. We just wanted people to play and have fun. And then you see the wind and you're just like, oh, I should just drive home. Like, what am I even going to try and teach these people? Like, how can I even make this fun? So it was always a challenge to try and get some of them to stick then when you had those bad first few days.
Right. And then, I mean, for the men's side, at least you added the rain, and then it just became layout practice before they knew what a layout was. And you just hope nobody broke any arms or shoulders. But I asked now because you have since retired from coaching and retiring now from the AUDL. So we're going to ask what's next for you in retirement, other than obviously lighting me up at pickup, which you could do until you're 60 years old. But I do ask you, so what is next? And obviously you've mentioned that you have a not so newborn anymore, but a young son at home and living the family life as well.
Yeah. So a few things. Some home renovations, just doing a little stuff, learning on my own. So that's fun, but that's not really Frisbee related. I was elected to the Long Island Ultimate Board, so trying to help out with some of that stuff. Technically, I ran unopposed, so I wasn't really elected, but whatever. I'm still interested in helping out. I'd like to set up like a summer camp program out here. I think that'd be pretty great. There's a good state park with some water and some fields and everything. So it might be nice to kind of like make a nice day camp out of that and kind of build the youth scene out here. So interested in doing that. I would also love to, be around the team still in some capacity. So I'd like to maybe call some games with you in the booth. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. I think it could be fun.
Yeah, we have no announcements yet to make other than it was a wonderful interview with Matt Pippin Auletta. So thanks again so much for joining me here on the Empire Podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me. We'll submit this as my interview for the booth.
And thanks to you, the listeners, as well, for wrapping up another edition of the New York Empire Podcast. From the entire New York Empire family and producer Al, I'm Dan Hilton. We'll talk to you next week.